Well, welcome to the 125th session of Black History Conversations. Can't quite believe we've got to this point. We certainly didn't anticipate that this was going to be such a long and ongoing pleasure, which is really, considering the subject matter that we're discussing, it's been great to get to know people, to make friends, and to make new friends. So it's really, really lovely. So this session is entitled a conference event because we had to make it sound a bit special because it was 125 of the Black History Conversations, and we entitled it Atlantic Links Next Steps in Reparation, because some of us are waiting with bated breath to see how we get on with the Pennants Project's application to the Douglas Pennant Family Foundation, because that is seriously a next step in reparation. So, yeah, we're exploring with colleagues who have been able to join us, and we're absolutely delighted that you've been able to join us. It's been quite a big break, and for me personally, it's been a huge break because I've actually been away and been touring around in Australia as well as New Zealand with a very good friend of mine who came over and stayed for Christmas. So, with 20 years of catching up, it was just brilliant. Okay, then. So, we start our Black History conversations with acknowledgements, and our first acknowledgement is that we acknowledge the injustice of the actions taken by the British and the other European countries that invaded and took possession of the islands in the Caribbean Sea, as well as the continents of North and South America. In addition, we also recognise the exploitation of the great continents of Africa, Asia, Australia, and many other parts of the world in the centuries of colonisation and ongoing exploitation. We acknowledge that this has resulted in the destruction and destabilisation of so many nations, peoples, and cultures. And just on this point, it's not necessarily all to do with colonialisation, but I'm almost afraid to switch the TV on or listen to the news at the moment. So much going on. Also, on this slide, we recognise the International Decade for People of African Descent. Now, we've kind of picked up on this from time to time during the 125 sections, but never really got into exploring in much depth. So, interestingly, I made contact. But before that, I'm now going to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, as they're the traditional custodians, and I wish to pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, because I'm actually here in outside Melbourne in Australia, where I'll be for a while until I manage to get back to the UK or come over to Jamaica or whatever happens next. So in this acknowledgement, I wanted to say that it's through valuing their history, the traditions, the culture and beliefs that we strive to stimulate awareness and promote respect for the Indigenous contemporary art and culture, and create a positive future for the Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities together. Now, this is taken from the Burundi Cultural Centre, which is really near to where I live, and it's their acknowledgement of country. So I've explained before, at every single meeting, maybe on a TV programme, maybe in some other venue, um, written on the walls to welcome you to a school, you will find an acknowledgement of country. If you're an Aboriginal person, you may well welcome to country, but that's quite a different ceremony. And I'm pleased to say that the Belgrave Survival Day, Belgrave's near here, is on the 3rd of March now, and I'm on the committee. Pleased about that. Yes. Surprise, surprise. So, welcome to Black History Conversations. We now have two slides that introduce us and give a bit of information. So just quickly whiz through this. Yeah, way back in October 2020 during COVID. And I managed until December 2023 not to get COVID. Then I got COVID and coughed all the way through the last session, you'll remember. then they identified it was COVID. And then I was fine, and then I've now got a chest infection afterwards, which apparently is quite common. So while we were reeling from witnessing George Floyd's murder, gosh, that was awful, we've completed 10 seasons and now into season 11. Black History Conversations managed by Learning Links International CIC. Several directors are with us today. I'm grateful of the support of many individuals who have joined us, and the individuals, organisations has given us support, like the International Slavery Museum and the National Trust. So many thanks to you and your organisations. I'm usually the person who introduces the sessions along with Garrick Prague, with support from June Elizabeth White-Smith-Gully, who's with us again today, which is wonderful, June. And the technical side's managed by Simon Fringo, who posts the recordings on YouTube on Belong's Nottingham platform at present. Now, one day in the future, we will have a posh website, and on that posh website, we will have the recordings posted. They are recorded on our working website, but they're also on Simon's site. Now, you don't have to do a formal Zoom registration anymore, but please share your email address in the chat so you can be added to the mailing. So I think I've just remembered to point that out to one of our newcomers, and we're delighted always to welcome anyone else to join us. Please switch your microphone off unless you're speaking. We don't have so many problems with this these days. But you're also welcome to switch your camera off at any time, especially if you've got everybody on the screen, because if you're moving around or whatever, it can be a bit distracting. And we also recognise that the subject material presented can be emotive and at times quite confrontational. Now, Garrick has said that he's happy to talk through any issues offline with anyone who feels that that would be useful. All right then, so this is our 125th session with introductions, and then we'll plan the order of the presentations, and I said, but please let me know if you think your time is limited. So, okay, do I go around the screen in the order on which you're presented to me? Well, I think I will if you don't mind. So first of all, Nigel Sadler. Nigel joined us a few weeks before Christmas to introduce himself and to tell us about the slave ship story, which you're going to need to remind me about, Nigel. It is 1 o'clock in the morning, remember, here. So turn your mic.
Yeah, I'm one of the researchers on a project to uncover the legacy of a slave ship that sank in the Turks and Caicos Islands in 1841. It's called the Troubadour. But I also have done other things. I was director of the National Museum in the Turks and Caicos Islands for 7 years. I'm one of the advisors right now for the Museum of Diversity, which is a planned new National Museum in London on Black history of Britain and the Americas and the Africa itself and the links. I'm also available for other help. So, for example, last week I was working with a couple of young people from Montserrat because after the volcanoes in Montserrat in the 1990s, half the population of Montserrat left the islands and are mostly living in Great Britain now. And there's a whole new generation of Montserrat young people who were either born and left the islands very, very young, or have now actually been born in Great Britain. And there's this disassociation between their cultural history and what's accessible to them. And so there's a couple of young people doing a documentary looking at how they can actually access, which also I gave some advice in a meeting with them, and I'll be working with them hopefully a bit more over the next few months.
Fantastic, Nigel. Thank you very much indeed. That sounds really, really exciting and interesting. And things are changing. Exploring Black history is not staying the same all the time. There are new needs coming up and new links being made. That's absolutely fantastic. Thanks very much indeed. Nadesh, would you like to introduce yourself next? Lovely.
Hello, apologies for the delay. I was in the middle of my lunch.
All right, sorry to disturb you.
No. Yeah, I came across the invite to this meeting on a BASA email, on the BASA email list, and it lends itself very closely to the work that I am doing and have been trying to do for the past 4 years. So I currently work in a variety of capacities as an ancient historian, a modern historian, and somebody who's very interested in integrating the visual with digital and heritage interpretation in heritage sites and online. So I currently work at Chiswick House. I'm the lead historian on their Black Chiswick Through History project, which explores our collection and our site through a different lens. And I also work with secondary schools, local community groups, so a diverse array of different institutions and organisations, if you like, on how they can connect to more diverse and inclusive narratives, and thereby kind of widen their audiences as a result. And much of my work, I would say, is digitally focused. So I'm really interested to hear how these transatlantic networks can be formulated. I use a database of what we call freedom seeker adverts, so adverts for runaway enslaved individuals across London and the UK. That is the kind of basis of most of the project work that I do. So it's about exploring Black presence in the 17 and 1800s, Black community, Black support networks, and it would be great to start kind of looking at how, in terms of reparations, is essentially we can start using access to knowledge and information as one of those key components. So everything I do is very much publicly, accessibly. That's the key aim, is to make the knowledge that we find available to share, if you like, throughout a kind of global online community. So I work quite closely with Wikipedia and part of their decolonisation project. So most of the work that I do in schools then translates itself into Wikipedia pages, so that there's a kind of global sharing component to much of what I do. So I have also been maybe starting to branch out and incorporate other elements into the project work I do. So working closely at the moment with the London Metropolitan Archives to give students of quite young ages, from year 9 onwards, experience in navigating archival materials. So we start to build a cohort of younger generation interested in Black history. And also with institutions like Fulham Palace, connecting to exhibitions like their current one on resistance. So trying to, I think, create maybe a slightly more honest portrayal of Black history, not just abroad, but certainly on, in terms of what's available to us locally. As you started with, it's about getting a better understanding of what our local history is.
Well, thank you very much indeed. And it's just brilliant that you've joined us. I know Garrick will be particularly interested, because you're saying, getting the stories of Black history out there. And one of the things that we've talked a lot about, but not done a lot about, is to share the stories that we're finding as we go through these Black history conversations. But you can only do what you can do. And the fact that we've done what we've done and we've recorded them all means that we've got, for example, when Nigel came and spoke about his research and work, we've got a recording of that. We now need to be able to ask permission, obviously, but then see how we can use those sorts of recordings. And
I think what's become very clear to me over the past few years is that there are lots and lots of people doing absolutely incredible work. What we don't have is an umbrella network that brings us all together. There are individual networks in academia, in certain, in heritage, blah, 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 but there's no overarching support or ability to kind of bring us all together on these pathways. So I suspect that a lot of us are doing the same work, but not really realizing it until I click on a link like this one, and then you start
fall upon a group like this. How fantastic is that?
And then you start to explore what other people are doing, and I find it a little frustrating at times that there's, I mean, one of the kind of elements I see is really vital right now is to try and pull together some funding and then to create that umbrella, that umbrella for all of us doing similar work, and then market it. You need to market it really well, because again, budget is a huge issue for all of us. We're all scraping together funds to do our individual bits and pieces, but if we could pool those resources and then create kind of wider networks and wider impact, then I think that's where we kind of need to start looking at going next, really.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and it's great to have taken this opportunity to get you to know you a little better. That's lovely. Kerry, you're the next on my screen. This is a bit awful, I'm going across the top here. Kerry, from the National Trust, Penrhyn Castle, North Wales. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, Kerry, and then we can have a little talk about how the activities that we're involved with our colleagues in Jamaica link with your work at the National Trust.
Yeah, so I'm Kerry. I'm the General Manager at Penrhyn Castle in North Wales, and I've been in post for just over a year. And I know that one of the ambitions that we have here at Penrhyn is to bring in those Black narratives into the castle and share the history with our visitors. And so I'm just interested to see how this network can support that work and how we can make links. So yes, I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much for coming again, Kerry. And thank you before Christmas telling us about how you were actually presenting the castle in its Christmas dress, really. And there's always this tension, isn't there, about, you've got to be accessible to the community, and their visits got to be enjoyable. The scones, jam and cream, or whatever you're serving, the barra is just beautiful. But also we need to make sure that we're telling the stories and helping the National Trust to progress understandings about the histories of the properties that they're involved with, because often initial research was done, but now we know there's a lot more going on. And I know you're working closely with April Louise Pennant, and that's wonderful. I think she should be in Jamaica now. I don't know if she's come across any of you, but she's doing research into the particular story of the link there. Thank you very much indeed, Kerry. That's brilliant. I hope you enjoyed the session. Now, Gary, come on to you. Happy New Year, Garrick. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Liz, and Happy New Year to you all. And I know that you've had a couple of really wonderful weeks in the sun, while we were holding on to our clothing and everything because of the wind and the rain. And you've seen the damage of all the flood waters. The damage is still here across England and Wales. If I can just say a couple of things, just picking up on the conversation around sharing information, because this is essentially what we're doing, information exchange and sharing around a Black history conversation. And maybe if we could just add a couple of additional words to Black history, it would be Black, British, and global history. When we start to talk about these things, maybe we should just think about the bigger picture rather than the local. The local stuff is good, but we want people to appreciate that Black history is not an isolated bit of history. It's connected to everything. It's much bigger, and we need to emphasize that when we talk to, particularly with students, children, and so forth. The other thing I'd like to mention, Liz, I think is quite important point at this stage rather than the end of the session. On the 24th of January, in a couple of weeks' time, we will be in Parliament. This is probably one of our most important rally, because this session is focusing.
Garrick, explain who it is. Garrick, explain who your organisation is.
Yes. So I'm a member of Justice for Windrush Generation. My colleague Roland Oizen is also on the call. We've been running a bi-monthly House of Commons parliamentary rally for over 2 years. And prior to that, we supported another organization that did it before us. We reached a stage where we feel that we need to step up our arcs of the government. And as a result of that, what we're doing on the 24th, we're having a Windrush manifesto conversation. We've invited all the key political parties. So that would be the present Home Secretary, the opposition, all the leaders from the various parties, including our Welsh colleagues, DUP, Greens, SNP, and we want to challenge the parties on what are they doing for Windrush. And we want to really push that because we're in an election year, and we want to make sure that Windrush is not forgotten. In the last few weeks, we've seen the post office scandal, miscarriage of justice, and I've written to the current Prime Minister, how do we compare the Horizon scandal with Windrush? You know, 1,300 people affected through the post office, up to 70,000, and Juanita could tell us the figures, 70,000 people, which we think impacted by Windrush, and yet this issue is still with us. It hasn't been resolved. So we're pushing that agenda on the 24th of January. And we hope to be able to come away with a firm commitment to a manifesto that you know, the opposition party can sign up to. We don't believe that we'll get much from the current government in terms of commitment, but we will see you know, what materialize on Wednesday, the 24th. So far, throughout our parliamentary rallies, we've not had representation from the Conservative Party. We've had representation from all the other parties, but nothing from the Conservative Party. And, you know, we are pushing them to make sure that, you know, they don't forget that this issue is partly their issue, as well as previous administration.
Gareth, thank you so much. And if I can just say for colleagues who aren't from the UK, you might not have heard about the post office scandal that's going on at the moment. We won't talk about it in depth, but what Gareth is saying is that the comparison is nothing like, but there are so many issues. That's really good to hear about it. And Gareth, I'm really pleased that you congratulated me on getting away and having good weather and everything. I got back. I live on a hill, a big hill, volcanic hill outside Melbourne. I came back to find security men on our road, stopping anybody else coming in because there'd been a massive landslide next door but one to our house. So as if we haven't gone through enough living over here with my family. We had one house completely destroyed as a tree fell on it in a storm, and now next door but one, half the garden has disappeared onto the main tourist road. This is due to the incredible amount of rain that they had while I was away. So at least I was away. That was a good news. So yes, Garrick, thank you very much indeed for explaining that. 24th of January, certainly a date for people who can actually come to the House of Commons and join in, can't they?
Yes, so all our event is physical and hybrid. So we're in committee room number 5 in Parliament, and the online is published on our Eventbrite platform, as well as social media, and it's out there in the public domain.
That's fantastic, and it's great work that you're doing with Justice for Windrush Generations, both you and Roland and all the others who are supporting you. Brilliant. Okay, next on my screen, Rose, you come up next then. So Rose is joined us before Christmas to tell us about your great book about the servicemen from Jamaica, and we've actually discovered that one of the servicemen that we'd worked on his story in North Wales, Garrick, yes, I'll tell you his name later. He actually, yeah, we've made some interesting links there as well. So anyway, over to you, Rose. Tell us what you're up to in Jamaica.
Oh, hi, Rose Johnson, and former head teacher, chief officer, and so on, but currently working or just completed my third book, British Caribbean Veterans Serving Queen and Country. Most of those veterans are Jamaican heritage, either by birth or through their parents in the UK. My focus was obviously on those who were serving from 1960 onwards. My current, I'm actually in Jamaica, which is fantastic. I'm having a great time meeting and greeting people, both family, new friends, and people hoping to meet yet others in my travels over the next 2 weeks. I'm based in Kingston, but traveling down country, as they say, to places like St. Elizabeth, which is where my family have come from. I'm hoping also to do some research in a place called Mitchelltown, which is where one of my grandmothers came from, because I'd quite like to do a little bit of work on the family history, particularly from the Black side of my family, which the history of which is actually quite poor for all sorts of obvious reasons. But I intend to do what I can. I've started on that work, and the oral history side of things is tricky because my grandmother is obviously well over 100, and those who would have known her would then have only been about 6 or 7 years of age. So I think it's going to be very difficult. However, I haven't given up on it. One thing I wanted to mention is my first visit to the Akompong Festival on the 6th of January, where Kodjo, it's a celebration of Kodjo beating the British, and on the parade ground, the treaty being signed. And that was absolutely fantastic. So yes, it's a real pleasure to be able to listen in and join in to the BHC, because I am completely committed to collecting more of the stories of Caribbeans, but particularly British Caribbean peoples, because I want them to use their narrative, not the narrative in the interpretations provided by others. So having done my third book, I'm off to my next couple. So good morning or good afternoon to who, whichever way where you are in the world.
Well, thank you so much. And Rose, it's fascinating to hear that. I'm particularly interested because while I was in New Zealand, I took the opportunity to do a little bit of research, needless to say, and to ask a few questions. The treaty made by the British with the Maori people is a really interesting one that could do with being looked at again, but in alongside other treaties that were being made at the same time. So that would be really, really interesting. I do apologise, but I forgot, Nadej, you put a note in the chat to suggest to Garrick that he might be interested in inviting Martin Ford, QC. I think you're already involved with him, aren't you, Garrick? And no doubt he'll be involved. So thank you very much indeed for that comment. And this kind of linking is important. So Rose, carry on having a brilliant time, and please keep us linked if you can. And Roland, realise you've joined us now, and you've added some information about that great event that you've got coming up on the 24th. That's really super. Now, Roger, you're next on my list. It's like being in class this, you get picked on.
Okay, yeah.
Roger contacted us after I'd been doing a talk to Wolverhampton TUC about Black history and the Robert Rumble story. And Roger, introduce yourself, please. It's the first time I've spoken
most
to you.
of my life I've been Professor of Industrial Relations at Keele University. I'm obviously semi-retired, so I'm now an honorary professor there. And my link with this project is that I'm engaged in a major study of the strikes and riots in the West Indies in the 1930s. So for those who don't know, between 1934 and 1939, there were a huge wave of strikes that led to riots, led to major reform of the trade union system, and many of the leaders then went on to become prime ministers in the independent countries. I'm looking at 8 of the English-speaking countries, including British Honduras and British Guyana, as well as 6 of the islands, including Jamaica and Trinidad and others. And so I'm looking, the project is about 2/3 of the way through, so I've looked at in detail at what happened, the way the British reacted, the nation of plantation economics, and a variety of other issues surrounding it, the way in which it was reported. But the particular, I mean, other people have done this, but they've not brought it all together, not brought it up to date. My particular angle, though, is the way the British working class movement, particularly the trade unions, the Labour Party, the Communist Party, and other groups, reacted and supported or didn't support the strikers and rioters elsewhere in the Caribbean. So one of the purposes and the links with some of what other people have said is that, in my view, the Labour Party and some of the trade unions, the TUC, for example, still have a problem with the Commonwealth, with colonialism, with Windrush, where they've been pretty feeble, with Black Lives Matter, where they've also been feeble, and with the whole issue of immigration, to be honest. And so the question is, well, how deep does it go? Why isn't the Labour Party, why isn't the trade unions, why aren't other groups more proactive? I mean, we made the point about Windrush, where the trade unions are helping, but not enough. And the question is, why not? And one of the issues I want to try to explore is, how deep does this problem go? How deep is the racism within the British working class movement? And not just amongst ordinary workers, but some of it indirectly through their trade unions and inside the Labour Party itself. And so one way of trying to explore their reaction, say, as I say, particularly to current immigration, is to look at what happened in the 1930s, where a lot of these things were, if you like, started going, because there were significant levels of support for a range of the West Indian strikes, particularly in Trinidad. But there's also a lot of resistance within the Labour Party and others. And in fact, the Fabians, one of the largest of the Labour groups, were very keen on eugenics. They thought Black Africans were inferior. And that, given that they're supposed to be a progressive liberal group, it's quite shocking how closely they were linked to eugenics. And there's a sense of that still in modern Labour politics. So I'm particularly interested in that. I'm looking at the practical ways in which support was given through a range of organisations, but also, if you like, the ideological blowback into the way they fell with colonialism. And if I may make the final point, of course, one of the things is the self-interest of British workers to have the particular trading patterns, tariff subsidies, and protectionism, which help the British workers maintain their standard of living at the expense of, obviously, colonial workers elsewhere. And one of the side effects is, particularly reading the great West Indian writers such as Eric Williams and others, who recently, his most important book has been printed recently, which is very helpful, is that they make the links between the growth of great British cities like London, Manchester, Liverpool, and the slave trade, and particularly the post-slave, if you like, wage slave in the plantation system. So the great wealth, the great houses of Britain can be traced. And I've got a particular section on one of the most hateful of all the figures, a man called Leonard Lisle of Taton Lisle, who was a very right-wing Conservative MP, who made a lot of speeches in the House of Commons about how important it was to make sure that black workers were paid really badly, and even case studies in Britain where, for example, in Cardiff, black unemployed workers were given lower rates of unemployment benefit because they argued they didn't eat as much. Now, I know 1930 is a long time ago, but I still think it's a very important way into some of these debates, because the legacy, I think, is quite important. So that's why I've linked in with you, and I'm very interested in the Pennant story and the related issues. So this is, so I've already published several articles and some more on their way, and hopefully by the end of this year, maybe a book with one of the major academic publishing houses. So I am trying to disseminate in my own way, and I do upfront discuss the question of the legacy. I'm trying to explain why the labour movement in Britain is still shy, I think, of lending its full weight to issues such as the slaver statutes, reparations, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fascinating. Thank you for introducing yourself, and it's good to meet you and talk like this.
Could I interrupt?
Yes.
There, just to follow on from what Roger has been saying, because I was very closely involved in watching the rampant racism of the trade union movement in the 1960s and earlier, where, trade unionists were coming out on strike to prevent black workers being promoted. It was really, really appalling. And now I go to meetings when trade union people who ought to know better get up and say, oh, we were in the forefront of promoting equality, race equality, and the elimination of colonialism, and so on and so on. And it was really only when the National Front started capitalizing on the racism in the trade union movement that people like Jack Jones and Bill Morris were able to turn things around a bit. But I think it's been very, very precarious. And we need to remember, the National Union of Seamen, for example, was formed as a racist organization to prevent black seafarers getting equal pay and conditions. So I would just say to Garrick, beware the Labour Party. They will betray you at the slightest opportunity. Let me tell you that in the 1960s, when Labour reneged on all their election promises and brought in the 1965 White Paper and the 1968 Immigration Act, I said to a minister at a meeting, the Dutch auction that Labour have now embarked upon on immigration will lead you know not where, but I guarantee it will eventually lead to the targeting of refugees and asylum seekers. And the immigration minister was there, and he responded by saying, if you believe that, you have got to be mad. No such thing could ever happen in England. And he did say England. So beware Labour. They will stab you in the back, given, if you turn your back on them. And indeed, they'll stab you in the front if you don't turn your back on them.
Professor Robert Moore, thank you so much indeed for that. Garrick, you wanted to say something, but I must say that Anita's put a really good comment in the chat. She said 100% the black community has been totally hoodwinked by Labour, snakes in the grass.
I mean, Robert is absolutely right. The evidence is there in the public domain, and we know this. And I mean, there is no party out there that, you know, we could actually say actually represent and stand up for black people. There's none. But we have to you know, tread carefully. You mentioned Bill Morris, because I knew Bill Morris very well, and I worked with Gary Morris in Liverpool in the very early days at the museum. You know, Bill will tell you, you know, some of the experience in you know, as a trade unionist, personal experience that happened, you know, to him. I mean, to be fair, you know, we have to keep challenging whichever government, whoever is in power. We have to keep challenging, because, you know, we cannot, you know, we used to say, put our eggs in one basket, right? We can't do that, because, you know, the basket just fall over and your egg mash up and gone. See? So we have to strategically look at the landscape and try to maneuver accordingly. You're absolutely right. Tread carefully. Now, interesting enough, so next Wednesday, the 24th, I'm waiting to see whether it will be Keir Starmer coming into the room or Yvette Cooper coming into the room, because he's a front, you know, he's a front bench minister. So let's just wait and see what happens.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that comment as well, Robert. And Roger, maybe you want to be in touch with Robert. I'm sure you can exchange emails, or I'll help with that. Thank you very much. And I smiled when, well, kind of winced really more, when I remember staying at a friend's beach house outside Montego Bay, just to make you all jealous. It was lovely. And it was the Tate and Lyle family's beach house. They had one of their plantation properties was up there, and it was very gorgeous. All right, okay, so thank you very much indeed for that. And Roger, I hope you'll come and talk with us some more. I was going to just share the screen a moment and just say that Vivian Crawford, who's with us, is
You should be listening to this. This guy's completely ripped apart the trade unions for their racism since the 1930s.
Sorry, I can't see the screen at the moment because I'm sharing. Do you want to follow on with that point? Okay, let's just look at this. Just this is to remind Roger where we're looking at from the point of view of the Pennants project, which is one of the things we're talking about. And we managed to find a picture of Robert Rumble. Our advisor, Professor, I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute and try and work out, is it Francis? Okay, we're all with it again now. All right, just to quickly share this then, if I can find it again. Yes, here we are. Professor Anthony Bogues wasn't able to join us today. He was going to, but I'd really like him to join us for quite a long session, because he happened to be working for a newspaper as a young man, and he interviewed Robert Rumble. So he knows an awful lot about what was happening at that time, and particularly about Robert Rumble's story. Also to remember that Bangor Archives have a wonderful collection, courtesy of the Pennant family, of their Jamaica papers, and in there are the sale documents, the conveyance documents for the Pennants plantation, Cupis and Pennants juices in the parish of Clarendon, and they were sold to Percy Junior Esquire. So he was a well-known, became very affluent Jamaican, and he was involved in all kinds of activities that benefited the community. So I just wanted to share that at that time, because we might not get back to that at this point that we're going through. So Roger, just please include us, and do you also, Roger, know of Professor Hazel V. Carby?
I don't know anyone really. I just do my own thing. Sorry about that.
Okay. Well, she has written quite a lot and is very knowledgeable about that time. And we're hoping she's going to join us to make a presentation about the book that she's written in the next few weeks. So she's actually the only person I've seen who's actually quoted the petition that the tenants in Pennants made to the Jamaican government, the then British Jamaican government. Okay, so Roger, we'll keep you posted on that. Juanita, how are you? It's lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too, Liz. I'm busy working and listening, but to all the exciting things everybody's been saying. So I've half picked up on what some people said and others. I'm really excited by what Professor Moore spoke about, and also Roger. But let me just first say that my name's Juanita Cox, and I'm a research fellow at the Institute of Historical Research, currently working on the Windrush scandal in its transnational and Commonwealth context. It's been a 3-year project that's coming towards a close round about, I guess, July. So it's still a few more months to go. I've been completely swamped with transcribing, which just takes hours and hours and hours, but also just doing lots of different conferences. And I kind of wear 2 hats, in that I'm very interested in the history of Black Britons, but also in oral history as a methodology. So I'm also on the trustee of the board of the Oral History Society, and I'm currently trying to find ways to support a project that's just trying to get off its feet at the moment at the London Metropolitan University. You know, they've got the TUC archives there, and they're looking to do a project on Black activism within the trade union movement, but also those who came into contact with the trade union, and through that contact managed to bring about wider changes within the trade union. So I've been talking to people like Russell Prophet. I don't know if some of you may remember him. Russell Prophet had an incident. He was actually the councillor for Lewisham at one point, and he had an encounter with the trade unions that were responsible for, I think it was the road sweepers union or something. So I can't remember the name of the union, but anyway, they were trying to prevent Black people from getting jobs as road sweepers, and he accused one of them of being a racist, and they took him to court, etc., etc. So we're just really interested in all the kind of different intersections between the Black community and the trade union movement. But that's an aside, and that's something for later. So yeah, and obviously at the moment, everything just seems to be exploding. It's just been mind-blowing. My stomach is churning. All this stuff with the as Garrick mentioned, with the post office scandal. You know, we've had the Grenfell Tower. The EU settlement scheme has been a load of rubbish and nonsense itself. There's lots of problems with that. The difference between the way they've treated the Caribbean community versus, you know, the way we see things going on with Ukraine, Afghanistan, the Hong Kongers. There's so much going on at the moment. A lot of it just points to obviously racism makes everything so much worse, but it's clear that there's major problems that occur between the shift from paper to computer says no culture, and also the kind of bureaucratic processes within the government clearly at a collapse. I mean, they can't even handle the immigration system at the moment that they're trying. They can't process anything. Everything is a complete and utter mess. Also, just in terms of the research and looking back, and actually the post office scandals really helped me think about this, because seeing that started kind of in the 1990s. This points back to Labour again. I mean, the Windrush scandal did not start with the Conservative Party. Absolutely no way. It started with Labour. And again, we have this issue now where, you know, the public service bargain, as it was called, you know, with the civil service now being eroded, and them not being in place to manage the checks and balances of government to prevent the corruption that's going on. There's just a nightmare at the moment. So I'm feeling very like I've been put through a tumble dryer and turned upside down. I don't know where to start with my work, frankly. But yeah, it's really put the cat amongst the pigeons in terms of the way I've been thinking about the Windrush scandal. I think it's been really useful. It's really useful broadening out the thinking to include things like what's going on with the post office scandal and all these other things, because it really just shows that the government has absolutely no regard for the working class, for the global majorities. You know, they use exactly the same language to the Windrush generations as they did for the people within the post office in terms of the, you know, you're the only one. This idea that everybody's just an anomaly, you know, you're the only one, you know, 20 years later, you're the only one. And then with the Windrush scandal, when the Commonwealth heads of government and everybody else was complaining about it, no, it's an anomaly. No, there's only been one person that's been caught up in this. You know, it's just that. So yes, as you can see, I'm very wound up, so I will end there. But lovely to see you, everybody.
It's always wonderful to hear from you, and and we need to recognise, you know, those of you who are at the, you know, the sharp end of all of this, and it is really hard. I mean, it's one of the reasons that we've said, you know, if people after these sessions just need to talk some more, then Garrick's someone who's putting his hand up for that. Thanks, Junita, very much indeed.
Just to say, I mean,
Garrick?
Juanita was very modest there because, you know, she didn't say much about the work she's been doing around the real stories, the live experience, capturing those Windrush generation and recording those stories. And she did a lot of work around that, talking to these individuals and getting first-hand information of their experience. And maybe you could just say a little bit about that in your research, please, Juanita.
Yeah, so I mean, we started off with a scoping project in which I guess the main thing for me was to think about why some people had got caught up in the scandal and some people hadn't. So I had interviewed people who hadn't been caught up in the scandal, but who had arrived here sort of in the 50s and 60s and kind of worked and was still living here, and trying to understand like exactly what happened. And what was really interesting to see was that basically everybody who, I mean, the vast majority of people who got their status by accident, largely because they were traveling, and then that forced them to get their passports, that forced them to regularize their status. So I guess one of the big things that came out of that early scoping project was the fact that the government clearly hadn't done any outreach to the community. I mean, all this that was going, anybody who knew about what was going on knew about it because of the activists within the community, people like June Elizabeth, who, when I interviewed June Elizabeth, and amazingly, June Elizabeth was telling me about how in the late 1970s, when the British Nationality Act bill was going through, that she had sat there and suddenly realized, you know, I love the statement June Elizabeth says, where she said, you know, she thought she was British, but then she could see that, you know, they have this legislation and then they put a comma after it, and then they just keep on changing what they're doing. So and then learning about that and how people then came to be mobilized and you know, move around the country, informing other members of the you know, various members of the Caribbean communities that there was a need to register. So we can see that the government had actually, I mean, what's come out of the research is that was quite a deliberate stance on the government, because they obviously were just trying to minimize the number of Black people in Britain anyway. But so then after I did the scoping project, we then decided to do a project that focused more on agency, because I didn't want to be part of a project that was focusing on simply the negative things that were happening to the community. I wanted to also be focusing on what happens when people take agency. So we were so I interviewed people who got caught up in the scandal, people like Glenda Caesar, but also was interested in people like Glenda Caesar because she then becomes an activist as a result of her experiences. We also then interviewed people like church elders, all the kind of advocates, so lawyers, activists, councillors, MPs, all the different people who were advocates of the community. And then we also then recognized, of course, that the way that the Windrush scandal was being presented in the beginning was as though it was just a British problem, as though it was something that was contained within Britain, but clearly it was something that was transnational because there were a lot of people that were locked out. So then we decided we were then going to interview diplomats within the Caribbean. So we interviewed people like British High Commissioners to Trinidad, Jamaica, etc., but also Jamaican diplomats. We interviewed Guy Hewitt, who had been present at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in April that kind of forced the whole thing onto the political agenda in 2018. And we interviewed a couple of people who had been locked out, one in, I think, Barbados and one in Trinidad. We're also interviewing people like Wendy Williams, who obviously steered the Wendy Williams Windrush Lessons Learned review. Who else? Yeah, just a really wide range of people so that we can have a permanent record of the unfolding of the Windrush scandal and what happened afterwards, but all primarily from the perspective of the Black community, because obviously what we're concerned about is the fact that, you know, in the future, people will be looking at whatever is archived by the government or in the National Archives, etc., but they won't know what the opinion or what actually happened from the perspective of the Black community. So yeah, that's why we're doing what we're currently doing. So thanks, Garrick, for prompting me to say that.
Thank you very much indeed as well for adding that too. I think June Elizabeth's point about, you know, suddenly wondering whether you were still British. I had to travel on my navy blue British passport. I haven't got a European passport anymore, and I just, it could just take away your citizenship like that. So yeah, we do need to keep an eye on it all, don't we, and understand. And it's great that you are doing the work to, you know, find the records and to really explore and also to look more internationally. I mean, things like Australia's whites only policy, I mean, didn't disappear until about the 60s or 70s, I think. You know, just unbelievable if we don't have that global, wider perspective that Garrick spoke of earlier as well. Right, on my screen next, Alex, you come up next, patiently listening to everybody else. You're all being really great. I didn't know how this session was going to turn out at all, but it's so interesting. So Alex from the International Slavery Museum in Liverpool, thank you for your help and support on an interesting project we've been doing relating to Welsh wool. So that's carrying on, and we've got some good stuff going on there. And I think over to you anyway now.
Thanks, Liz. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Project Assistant Curator at the International Slavery Museum. But my presence here is kind of partly to do with that, but also an outgrowth of some of my work previously. I was previously lecturer in modern history at the University of Wales, Trinity St David, where I did some work on the connections between the founders of that institution and slavery, namely that some of them were directly enslavers. I won't delve into that because the very observant of you and very keen can go away and find a talk that I gave to this group a few months ago where I talk about that in detail. But what I thought I would do today is just give a bit of a context of where we're at to. So more of an institutional perspective So for those of you who don't know, the International Slavery Museum exists in Liverpool. It's been there since 2007. It inherited a collection and space that was previously part of the Merseyside Maritime Museum, the Transatlantic Slavery Gallery, and it's existed as at least a titularly different separate institution since 2007, although it's always been quite an awkward situation to explain because it's actually still in the same building as the Maritime Museum. We are in a process of change at the moment, and that will lead to a new extension of the museum being built. And so it's an exciting time to be part of the museum, generally, from the perspective of myself as a researcher and a curator and rethinking how those collections are going to look. There are a couple of things that I want to say about that are really quite useful for anyone who's paying attention to the museum. There are a few important updates that might be worth people being aware of. So the last time I was here, I was talking about how we're trying to have a community-focused approach to our redesign of the museum. And one of the things that I discussed there was that we had a call out for appointments of freelance curators. So these are people with different expertise who hopefully will come from different backgrounds, who will share with their knowledge and will develop content for the museum. So I'm happy to say that those 8 were appointed and are now in post at the museum and are working closely with ourselves. And perhaps more headline grabbing and very significantly, as of Monday, we have a new head of the museum. So new head of museum is my colleague, Michelle Charters. Michelle is really well known in Liverpool as a community activist, especially in the Black community in Liverpool, or Black communities in Liverpool. She was previously CEO of the Cumber Ramani Centre in Toxteth, historically the home of Liverpool's Black communities. So it's a moment of change here, and one in which we're hoping to embrace more conversations, get more people's voices represented in the museum, hence my presence here, really to put that on your collective radar. Another exciting thing that's happened recently is that we appointed new architects to lead on the renovation of the museum. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to share more details on this. It's still officially embargoed, the names of who the architects are, but I can just say that we're very pleased and excited by the appointments as a curatorial team here. And the final thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about is kind of in response to a point that Gareth made a few moments ago in his little blurb. Gareth was talking about the need for local, national, international, global perspectives to align with one another. So I thought it might just be worth, as another FYI, just flagging something that the Slavery Museum's involved in. Because we're one of the contributors to a global curatorial project, which is led by the Smithsonian National African American History and Culture Museum in Washington, D.C., and the Ruth J. Simmons Center for the Study of Slavery and Justice at Brown University in the United States. And what this is attempts to forge international collaborations between heritage professionals in a variety of different institutions in, let me just see if I get the list up here, so that I don't miss anybody out. The United States, South Africa, Belgium, France, Senegal, Netherlands, and ourselves in the United Kingdom. But another reason for mentioning this is that the project really was conceived by a man we've already heard discussed today, so Professor Anthony Bogues. And actually, Tony was in Liverpool just last week. He gave a talk. He gave us some insights into the work that he's doing in Brown, the work that we can do collectively, and how we can genuinely make this an international collaboration. And Tony's really such an enthusiastic and inspiring guy, that I thought it was worth just saying that, just giving an example of how these connections can be forged and can be maintained. So I think that's enough from me. If you don't mind, I'll shut up there.
Well, thank you very much indeed. And yes, I knew that Anthony Bogues was in the UK, which is one reason why I thought he was going to. Originally, we thought this might have been a session where he was the keynote speaker, and then he announced he couldn't come. So I was kind of, oh, right, okay, fine, we'll do it in a different way. But anyway, that's really, really interesting to hear about that. And the international collaboration is so important. And one of the things that the North Wales Jamaica Society, whose chair is here, Garrick Praug, has been doing has been looking to work with the International Slavery Museum in Liverpool, because North Wales was in the hinterland supplying goods, services and personnel to the business of slavery that went on in Liverpool and went out of Liverpool. So my question I want to ask you, Alex, and then if anybody else has got any points, is that we've realised that we can apply, Learning Links International, can apply to the Welsh Government for projects through an initiative called Tithe. And one of the initiatives that we'd like to do, we'd like your support with, because we'd like to explore it's about exchanges. So with adults education, adults can exchange and investigate the slavery ports of Nigeria, specifically Nigeria we're looking at. You have to look at one country that links with Wales. So what we're really interested in asking for your help is about the Welsh slave captains, because there are a number, I know, of slave ship captains who are Welsh. So that would tie us down quite well then to explain and explore the story of the Welsh involvement in Liverpool, and then that link with the West African coast, particularly in the slave ports of Badagry, Calabar, I think there's another one. So it'd be really interesting, because our organisation, Learning Links International, we have 2 directors who are Nigerian, and they're really interested in following that through. In the same way, we have 2 directors who are Jamaican, and they lead on our Jamaican link projects, and the rest of us who are mixed around the world. That would that be okay?
So I mean, there's sort of 2 ways to answer that. And as you know, visiting and the way we email and stuff, if you have any direct questions that I can answer or help and do a bit of research myself, I'm always willing to do that. The second thing is to say, in terms of like a funding application or anything like that, there is a process that we go through, a sort of declaration of interest, and then we'll assess it on the basis of what our workload is, essentially. And it does sound a really exciting project, and one that, in principle, we'd be interested in. I will say, because of the way I've introduced it, it is a time where we're undergoing a major transformation of the museum, and there's a lot of competing demands on our time and resources. So that's just a caveat to say that it might be that we think it's a great project, but we can't. I'm not saying that is the case. We judge everything on its own merits, but just to not overpromise is always my mantra.
Thank you, Alex. That's very good. And my caveat is that you're actually based in England, and this is Welsh money. So we've got to be really sensitive about, so it may well just be the emails and advice that we need, and we can send Welsh
and it may be
people
that,
into
yeah,
Liverpool.
it may be that
research.
there's stuff in our collections that we can help with. Yeah.
Okay, that was good. Thank you so much, Alex. Right, now various people have left and I've lost my place on the screen. Okay, Robert, I think you're next. I can't hear you, Robert. Robert.
Liz, can I just?
Oh,
This is
Francis, you're coming in.
Francis
Lovely, Francis.
speaking. You
Yeah.
can't see me.
No.
But I was just wanting to draw attention to a letter in chat from the Dictionary of Welsh Biography,
Oh, yes.
who are having a day 25th of January in Storio in Bangor, wanting anybody from any of the ethnic minorities to drop in with any historical material that they have. I think they're looking for somebody, for ethnic minority candidates, as it were, for the of National Welsh Biography.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if anybody who, belongs to a society or anything like that, which has a number of ethnic biography people, it would be, worth thinking of mentioning this 25th,
Okay,
11
so
to 4.
thank you very much
That's
indeed.
it. Yes, somebody's got it. Yes.
Robert put this in the chat, and I've just picked it out and put it on the screen here.
Yeah.
So the National Dictionary of Wales Biography drop-in.
Yes.
Oops, I'm fiddling around here.
The people working on this say that the Dictionary of Welsh Biography is overwhelmingly male, white male, and clerical. It's full of worthy 19th century Welsh preachers and ministers and so on. And they're making a real effort on this now. We've been able to name a number of people who ought to be included in that Dictionary of Biography. The important thing is, by the way, that you have to be dead to get in the Dictionary of Biography. There's no space for the living.
But you might, like newspaper biographies, have one in preparation.
Yeah. Anyhow, you asked me to comment, Liz. I'll just be brief because
yes, do.
I'll have to leave fairly soon.
Yeah.
We are mounting a major exhibition shortly, and it will be opening, I think, at the Storio, probably in February. And it has a lot of artwork produced by minorities currently living in North Wales, Chinese, Japanese, Nigerian, refugees, asylum seekers, travelers. They're all producing these stitch stories, which are trying to sort of tie together the threats of empire and contemporary Wales. There are also films, filmed interviews with or about prominent minority people in North Wales. So that is really going to be I think quite a spectacular exhibition that will travel around North Wales. I will probably have to leave fairly soon. Can I
That's
just
fine, Robert.
finish off by saying that while most of us are interested in history, and I certainly am, the contemporary situation is getting very much worse. The new immigration bill, which is now going to target people who've been settled in Britain for very many years, are going to find themselves being removed or deported. The bill is so bad that it's almost impossible to debate it and to argue with politicians about it because it's full of untruths and lies that there's just no basis for discussion. So it's an absolutely appalling bill. And as you know, they're also targeting student families. And I think that's going to be an issue in Bangor. And it's going to be an issue for any people in the Caribbean who are thinking of coming to study in Britain.
Yeah.
Very severe restrictions are going to be taken on your capacity to have your family with you, or even your family to come and join you for a holiday. Alongside that, of course, there's legislation to prevent protest and to restrict freedom of speech. So it's becoming increasingly difficult to mount any kind of public opposition to these appalling measures. And one of the bills actually has what's called placeholder paragraphs in it. There are blank spaces, and the government is going to introduce new clauses in the legislation, probably during the third reading, which means there will be no opportunity for any public, or more importantly, parliamentary scrutiny. So this is a major reduction in parliamentary autonomy and scrutiny of legislation. It's one of the dubious benefits of Brexit. When people thought, we would be regaining autonomy, they didn't realize what they'd be regaining it for. So the situation is very, very grim at the moment. And that's what's taking up more of my time than the history at the moment. That's
Robert,
me done.
I totally understand why, and you can see my reaction that I'm choking here. What can you say? It's just awful. Okay, deep breath, be brave, keep going, folks. Okay, on the screen we've also got Vivian Crawford with us. Vivian, are you there at the minute? Vivian? Oh, yes. Vivian, it's lovely to have you join us as ever. Vivian is actually the chair of the Pennants Project Heritage Group. When we managed to at least get an application in for an exciting potential exchange visit with Tythe. So Vivian's relatively recently, also retired as Chief Executive Officer, I think it's your title, at the Institute of Jamaica. So we're always so honoured, Vivian, that you take time to join us and really appreciate it. So introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Vivian Crawford of No Fixed Address, and I want to thank
Dr. Vivian Crawford, I'm sorry, excuse me. Dr. Vivian Crawford.
My doctor is the verb. But I want to thank you most sincerely, Liz, and to our participants. And Liz, do allow me for the records to thank you on this, the 125th anniversary of this meeting, to thank you for your continuity of spirit. Our own Jamaican Professor Matthew Smith, he's now at University College London. At his inaugural address here at University of the West Indies, said that the historian is our memory. That's why we are meeting here, and that's why we are so indebted to you, Liz, and to the participants who have come in from time to time. I want to share with you briefly, in keeping with my height, but I hope in terms of content, in keeping with my weight, to share with you that I had a very special privilege on the 27th of December, where I was invited by government to be the guest speaker at a function to honor Samuel Sharp, our national hero. That was held on the 27th of December in St. James. And those of you who go to Jamaica, when you pass Montego Bay, you'll see Sam Sharp Square named in his honor. After the 3-day, Sam Sharp was born, some historians say 1780, some say 1801. Be that as it may, he was born. And it's a very unusual situation because our enslaved did not get a surname until 1838, as I have said on this program. But Sam Sharp had the name of his boss, of his master, Samuel Sharp, who was a lawyer, solicitor in Montego Bay, and also the solicitor for Tullow Estate in Kensington. Oh, that name, Kensington, where Sam Sharp worked. And the enslaved decided that after the Christmas holidays, 3 days they would have a resistance, a sit-in. It got out of hand, according as Malcolm Gladwell would say, tipping point. So the enslaved, they burnt down the huts, and the rest is history, as they say. 500 enslaved died, 300 were executed, 16 of the colonial masters were killed. And I want to say also that Sam Sharp, while he was in prison, because he was executed the following year, 1832, May, while he was in prison, he spoke with the Reverend Henry Bleeby, the Methodist minister, and he told the Methodist minister, quote, "I would rather die on yonder gallows than live in slavery," unquote. Sam Sharp, what he did accelerated the process of freedom which the enslaved got in 1838. But Sam Sharp was born at Catadupa in St. James. Now, Catadupa is a Greek word for the cascades of the River Nile in Egypt. And I'm not a historian, I'm a storyteller. The storytellers and historians will tell you that there was by the River Nile, we would have learned in Sunday Sabbath school about a baby who was left there, Moses, and he was able to liberate his people from enslavement. And fortuitously, sorry?
Carry on, Vivian. It's
yes.
Okay.
And Sam Sharp, born in Catadupa, named after the Nile Falls in Egypt, he was able to liberate his people from enslavement. And I said on a program just Monday, I was doing a presentation, a radio program, that it could be that somebody in St. James, a child should be named Catadupa, put it as a middle name, whether male or female. And my host was saying, you can imagine somebody named John Catadupa Millman. And so it is. That is my presentation in a nutshell. Thank you.
Well, tell me that last bit again. His name was what?
No, Sam Sharp was born in Catadupa. And Catadupa is the name of a place in Egypt where the falls are, the cascades of the River Nile. So some European went to St. James and said, this looks like Catadupa in Egypt, and named it Catadupa. So I'm suggesting that a child could be named Catadupa as a middle name. You could imagine John Catadupa Millman.
But why my ears perked up was that I once interviewed a wonderful Rasta called Fillmore Alvaranda. Sorry, I'm pausing. Fillmore Millman Alvaranga. He was one of the 8, I think there were 8 Rastas who went on a trod to Ethiopia and met Haile Selassie, and his middle name was Millman, and he couldn't, we just sat and because it was the beginning of the interview and I didn't know what his full name was and he didn't know what my name was. We just sat and stared at one another, how we could have the same name. It isn't as if it's a common name. Well, storyteller, historian, and generally wonderful person, Dr. Vivian Crawford, we thank you so much for informing us a bit more there, and it holds us to the reality of what we're talking about, Black history, and the stories of that uprising, and fitting it all into the context of how it happened, and the freedom, and then I'm interested personally now to explore more about the after freedom and those difficult 100 years and subsequent. Okay, so thank you so much, Vivian. That's absolutely brilliant. Now we've lost one colleague here.
Beverly had to go. She said she had to go, so
yeah, that's okay. And Junita's going to go. And June Elizabeth, do you want to go next? Because Junita's going to go.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I shall make my presentation very short because of the time, you know, to get anybody else in. I'll just introduce myself. I'm a Black history researcher, currently doing my MA history at the University of Northampton Centre for Historical Research. My background, I'm a nurse, retired nurse, semi-retired health counsellor, former police officer. At the moment, I'm the case manager for the Action for Race Equality Windrush clients. And I'm an international Windrush advocate, trainer, consultant, ambassador. And I belong to many organisations, including the Nurses Association of Jamaica, the Mary Seacole Memorial Association, the Windrush International Network. I support a lot of Garrett and Rowland's Justice for Windrush. I normally help host the Zooms at the House of Commons. Right, what I wanted to say, right, because I'm going to keep it short, I'd like to be in contact with Roger Serif, Professor Roger Serif. And also, I'm interested in looking at Professor Robert Moore's book, what he put out there. When Juanita was giving her presentation, and I'll close with this because, like Dr. Crawford, I'm a storyteller and a historian. And I just wanted to say that it was 1980, and Mrs. Thatcher's right-hand man, John Wheeler, he came to visit us in Paddington when I lived in London. I forgot to say I'm a Northamptonian born of Jamaican parents, and also the great-great-granddaughter of Emily Pennants. Okay, so I was told, I went in a meeting as a citizen, British citizen, because I was born in England, and after his presentation of why the Nationality Bill was amended, I was told that even though I was born in England, I would have to pay to be a British citizen. So going into a meeting as a British citizen, and in 15 minutes, because I said, if I don't pay the £50, as it was them days, to be a citizen, I was so shocked. He said I would be an alien. So that's how I was stripped for a few minutes. And then the next week they changed their mind and said that if you were born here, because it was if you were born here and your parents were not citizens, which I knew very well, everybody came over as British subjects. That's another way of getting money from us, right? So that's why I said to Juanita, Dr. Cox, I learned in 1980 that the way they write their policies, they can always change the full stop into a comma. That's what it's all about. And they continue to do that I think Robert Moore was saying they leave spaces and they come back when they're ready. So I'll just end there, but I just wanted to say Northampton has got many leading. We were pioneer for Black history. In the last century, we got like 500,000 to do oral Black history. So a lot of people had our templates. And last year, Liz was in town, Liz Millman, the famous lady, and we'd launched for Windrush Day. Liz came afterwards because it was on for 6 weeks. Windrush exhibition, and they interviewed a lot of people of the Windrush generation and made a digital film and called it an exhibition. And when Liz came to town to visit me and my husband, she went to see it herself. And we've been told that we can get 2 CDs, 2 DVDs of it each. So I shall be donating one to Liz. End of my presentation.
Good, we can share it then online, can't we?
Yeah.
Excellent. And I'm sure Nadej will be really interested to know of that. That it was an excellent visual presentation. Really good indeed. Okay then. Well, thank you. Your few words are so valued, June Elizabeth. Thank you so much, and the work you do is incredible.
I just wanted to say, sorry, last week, one of my clients was awarded some compensation and he's quite happy, even though I think he should get a bit more. So with 6 clients, I've got £250,000 between them. So I just thought that's a bit of a good news for some people.
It is some really good news. Thank you. Well done. Robert's going to leave us now. Thank you for joining us, Robert, and sticking with us and making some truly valid points and raising some real issues. Yes, Black history is very important, but what's going on currently is also desperately important. We can't do one or the other. Francis, do you want to have a couple of words? You've been patient waiting with us. Okay, well, I'm going to see then if Ivor, are you there? Oh, Francis, are you there now?
Well, I am, yes, but of course you can't see me. But I am not a great, I don't think, but I have dropped in and out of your events, haven't I, on occasions?
Well, we really appreciate it because it's important that folks from North Wales are supportive of our activities, because we act often on behalf of North Wales when it comes to looking at Black history issues and campaigning and things. So thank you, Francis, for joining us. Thank you very much. Garrick, you wanted to say something, then we've got Ivor and David.
Yeah, just to say what June Elizabeth just mentioned about the charge of £50 that the government charged for your citizenship is moved from £50 to over £2,000, the fee. And if you look at the actual fees across the whole of the visa, you will see that, you know, it's where the money is coming in from people from overseas being exploited. Yeah.
I don't know where we'll get to. Thank you for that, Garrick. Thank you. Ivor, now, Ivor, are you there?
Yes, Liz, I'm right here. Yes, I'm here. Yes. Happy New Year to you all.
Happy New Year to you, Ivor.
Yes, I'm here.
Ivor's one of the Pennants project, and is an activist. He's been active in the Pennants project since forever, haven't you? Helped us get it all going, and and working on it. And I was just going to, I haven't got to, oh yes, here we are. Let me just share a couple of pictures on the screen, Ivor. Here we are. This is a Pennants Project meeting. Here's Ivor here, and your good lady there.
Yes.
June Elizabeth talking from the car there. Just hope she'd parked up. Here's Coy Roach, who had to leave us earlier, and Walter is Walter Lavelle, who's a Rotarian involved in the project. And so we start off the meetings on the Thursday at 9 o'clock on Zoom in Jamaica. We're supported by Coy, Vivian, and the whole rest of the team. We've got the committee was established with support from Lola Ramakan. She's a patron. And we work with the Pennants Community Development Team, Lorna, yourself, Ivor, Clifford, Walter, Tuthnelia, and the Maypen Rotary Club and the Pennants Rotary Community Corps, supported by the Clarendon Community Development Committee Benevolent Society. That's Eureka Douglas. So this is one of the things we wanted to talk about in this whole session. So it's been really interesting to get everybody's different points of view about different things they're working on. But this is a main project that Black History Conversations is supporting. We facilitate through this, but also with these separate meetings. And our focus is on ways to develop work with the Douglas Pennant Family Foundation to support their aims and support the educational activities in Jamaica. To research local history, especially the story of the tenant strike and Robert Rumble, we've referred to that, and continue to develop friendships between people in Jamaica and North Wales. And we've just applied for tithe funding to enable us to do that. So I just thought I'd share that, Ivor, while you're there, so you know that folks know what you're about. We haven't heard anything yet from the Douglas Pennant Family Foundation, though, so I'll try and follow it up by next week. So what's the weather like there, Ivor? Have you got good weather today? Turn your mic on.
Yes, the weather's quite fine. Outside is shining and the other cool right now as well. Elvis is shiny. Not hot as well in the summertime. But
yeah, lovely.
Let's say good weather right now. Good weather.
All right. Well, I'll tell you about my travels and my adventures and my challenges when I got back home on Thursday of next week.
Thank you for
the next North Wales Jamaica Society meeting, Garrick. I'm just going to put that up on the screen.
Problem here.
Oopsie daisy, losing my place here. It's getting a bit late. Share screen. Right. Here we are. Right. So the next North Wales Jamaica Society meeting will be the 3rd of February. It's always the first Saturday afternoon of the month at 2 o'clock in Wales and at 9 o'clock in Jamaica. Is that all right? See that, folks? So this is the meeting of the North Wales folks and Jamaican folks together on a Saturday once a month. And then at the moment, well, last year we were meeting every week with the Pennants Project, but we'll probably make it, I don't know, every couple of weeks or once a month. But let's see what we've got to organise, because if we've got plenty of money to spend, then we're going to need to have a bit more discussion about how it gets spent. Okay, so that's good. Thanks, Ivor. And David, how are you? Have you made it through?
Yes, I'm still here. I'm very well, thank you. I've been listening with interest. There's lots of interesting things going on.
It's been brilliant, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And how are you doing?
I'm absolutely fine, thank you. Yeah, no problems. The weather's okay, dark and gloomy, but you expect that this time of year, so it's all right. Yeah, I'm all fine. Basically, just to introduce myself, first of all, I should apologise for the camera. I've got a really dear old friend, my laptop here, but it's about 16 years old, and a couple of months ago the camera packed up, and I can't bear to throw such an old friend away. So you'll just have to put up without seeing me.
No problem.
Basically, my contribution to all of this, I think, is a website called Historical Roots. I'll put the link in the chat in a minute. But I've been interested to hear what people have been saying. Nadej in particular mentioned about the need to join up. And that reminded me of a meeting I went to in Birmingham Library about, I don't know, it must have been 5 or 6 years ago now, where exactly the same thing was being discussed. And I'm sorry to say nothing came of that. It's a tough ask if you're going to try and join up all of these Black history interest groups, but it's certainly something that I would support. So what have I been up to recently? Yeah, that's it. I was going to really just say that there's been a few, since I was last on one of these, there's been a few extra pages have been added. So there's been several things about the Windrush. I could draw your attention to a book that's been produced recently by the Windrush Foundation, which tells the stories of, I think, something like 80 people who were on the Windrush itself, stories that have never been told. That's available through the Windrush Foundation. So if you Google the Windrush Foundation, their website will come up. It's a very beautifully produced book, and that's, from that point of view, I can recommend it. My colleague Bill Hearn has written great big chunks of it, and I wrote 1 or 2 little bits. So there's the Windrush. I've also put an article on the website recently about, we do talk a lot about the Empire Windrush, the ship, and we lose sight, I think, of the fact that there were many, many other ships, and obviously aeroplanes as well, but ships that brought people from the Caribbean. I've written an article recently about the Jamaica Producer, which shuttled back and forth across the Atlantic for a couple of decades at least. And each time it came, and it came up to 10 times a year, it brought 40 or 50 passengers from the Caribbean. And I think the role of the Jamaica Producer and boats, ships like that, has been very much overlooked. I mean, the Jamaica Producer alone brought almost 4 times as many people as the Windrush did, all of whom, or the vast majority of whom, would now be regarded as members of the Windrush generation. So I think we shouldn't just think about the Windrush ship in isolation. It's part of a much, much bigger picture, which I'm sure people on here will be well aware of. But I think the role of these other ships is often overlooked. You've got on there a screen, I see you've got the story that Audrey Juju wrote about West Indian airmen at Hunmanby Moor in Yorkshire. That's a particular sort of love of Audrey's, the fact that that story hasn't ever really been told properly. So that story is there.
David, can I just tell you something about this story?
Yeah.
I'm interrupting you, I know, but I put it on another PowerPoint for another reason and found it. Audrey told me that the article was there, and I looked it up, and it's a good long article. But we in North Wales had have a member of our North Wales Jamaica Society committee, Karen, her father was Jamaican. And we recognised him this year on Windrush Day. He's passed now, sadly, but the RAF are actually going to display his uniform and his medals, especially at RAF Valley. And then I asked Audrey, because I've got a vague recollection that the family said that, excuse me, that he'd first of all come to a place in Yorkshire, and sure enough, she checked it out, and he did. So we know a bit more. His family now know a bit more about his story. So we're just really grateful, and it's great that you've got the site where these sorts of things can be shared. Really, really good. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Audrey's definitely an expert on that, so I'm not surprised that she was able to help you. In fact, I think most aircrew who came from the Caribbean to serve in World War II would have spent some time at that airbase in Filey. It was where people went for their initial training. We've also got an article fairly recently by another guy called John Ellis, who's particularly interested in military history, and he has done an article about certainly one of the first Black members of the RAF. It found a member when it was set up in April 1918. So again, that's another article that you can find on the website. And the only the last one I'll mention is an article that you'll find on there as well about a nurse called Sarah Woodbine. This is basically a book that I researched with John and also with somebody from the Royal College of Nursing, because this lady, Sarah Woodbine, was a nurse, and I came across her first of all as a nurse in Croydon, where I live, and followed her career with some interest and delved deeper and deeper. It transpired that she was born in Buenos Aires in Argentina, but her father was born in Jamaica, and both of his parents were born in Jamaica. So this is a nurse of Jamaican heritage who in 1893 was working in Croydon. And the number of black nurses you can find working in England at that time, well, I think you need the fingers of less than one hand to count them all. So it's really quite a good find. I'm going to plug the book simply because there's no money in it for me. I and the two co-authors agreed that any royalties would be donated to an NHS charity, and I made the first payment a couple of weeks ago. So it's available for £5. It's called Sarah Woodbine, a Black Nurse in Victorian Britain, or is it England? I can't remember. I found it a very interesting story. It's great fun researching it. And she's of Jamaican heritage, so any nurses or ex-nurses on here who have Jamaican heritage might be interested in the story. £5. I make not a penny out of it. It's I think a very interesting story, and it's just one of many interesting stories that you can find on that website, which I will now put in the chat.
Put in the chat.
There you are. It's in.
Historical, so it's history, then CAL.
Yeah.
Historicalroots.com. History, CAL, roots.com.
Yeah.
Historicalroots.com. Thank you so much. And do promote any books, anybody, because I think it's really important that we do promote some of the new materials that are coming out and the new stories that are being shared. So I'm sure June Elizabeth will be delighted to get herself a copy of Sarah Woodbine, a Black Nurse in Victorian England book. Really good story there. It's absolutely fascinating. And another point that you made was about JP. Now that's a really, really valid point. Not patronising that others aren't, but JP helped the charity we set up in 2000 to ship the computers to Jamaica. So to realise that they were also active, because obviously on the banana boats, you could go on a cruise on a banana boat, go to Jamaica and back. So how interesting. And when the High Commissioner visited Wales, he went to visit JP because they're based down in Cardiff. How intriguing. So give my regards to Bill as well, that he's managed to produce the book, and that's another book that we could certainly recommend. So we need a recommended reading list, really.
Yeah. Okay.
On the list, Garrick. All
Just
right.
wondering, Liz, because David just mentioned about the Woodbine, and I'm just wondering the connection between Sarah Woodbine and the family. The Windrush Foundation has researched the Woodbine, particularly around the music of and the Beatles and the influence in the music. Is that the same family name, David?
Could be the famous the
one
white
of the daughter
Woodbine.
of Woodbine, that the same family.
It's getting a bit too complicated, Garrick. We'll follow that one up again. I can only think of the first Woodbine I ever tried. That put me off smoking for life.
About smoking. Yeah. Behind the back sheds.
Right. So I think everybody's had a chance to chip in. I didn't have any idea how this 125th session would work out. We couldn't really have anticipated that it would be as great as it's been, because just to have a good crowd of people supporting us, and also to yeah, here we are. I'm looking for another of my PowerPoints. Yeah, it's just been great, and I thank you all very, very much indeed. This is our final slide then, just to say, Black History Conversations, we've managed 125 sessions. We've now got a slightly new look, old website, and we will get on with the new website. That's one of my New Year's resolutions, Garrick, you'll be pleased to know, and June Elizabeth. So we started in October 2020. We just started as an opportunity to share some research that community researchers were doing in Nottingham, Simon Fringo, in Scotland with David Alston. And now we must have had well over 100 different speakers, different contributors. People have shared the work they're doing or the stories that they know. And now 125 sessions later. So thanks to everyone involved. It's just amazing. And it's amazing that I'm still awake. So all the very best to you. I'll tell you more about my adventures.
What's the time now, Liz?
3 o'clock in the morning. My
3
adventures
o'clock?
in
No,
yeah,
mercy.
adventures. We got to Sydney. It was really good in Sydney, and then we got to went to Sydney for New Year, and then we went to New Zealand. And as I say, we've got two up and coming projects coming from it, and I really didn't go with the intention of doing any work, but I wouldn't be me, would I, if I didn't? Okay, well, thanks ever so much, everybody, and all the best, and see you next week.
Go to your bed now. You got to go and sleep now, Liz.
Yes, yes.
Get the Ovaltine and the Milo now and go off. Yeah.
I will. I need it with my.
Okay. Take care. All right.
Thank you.
Good night.
Gary,
Bye-bye.
give me
Thanks,
can
everybody.
you give me a call?
I will.
please?
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, one
Will
love,
do, yeah.
everybody. Happy New Year. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
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 Bye, Liz.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Three cheers for Liz.
Clap, 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 clap.
You
Bye.
pay-pooray, you pay-pooray, you pay-pooray.
There's only you and me left now. It's and Iva's still here. That was great, that session. I can put my picture back on again. I was just trying to copy the
Thank you very much,
the
Liz.
chat that people do.
Thank you
Yes, it
very
went
much,
okay,
Liz.
didn't it? Went
So
okay.
much is owed to you, Liz, and God bless you.
Well,
Ditto,
thanks so
ditto,
much
ditto,
to you.
ditto,
And
ditto.
did you have a good Christmas?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I took it easy with the POKE.
Oh.
What is POKE? The R is silent. Iva's telling you.
Iva's laughing into this. Translate
Yes.
for me, Iva.
He's poking you. He's poking you.
PORK.
He does poking you.
The pork.
He's poking you.
Lovely. Well, I'm sure you all really, really enjoyed it. Okay,
Yes,
then.
yes.
All right. Off we go then.
Thank you very much. Good.
Bye.
Okay. Bye for now then. Bye.
Bye. Bye.